I was reviewing our monthly credit card statement when the travel agent called, asking about dietary restrictions for Mrs. Rebecca Chen's romantic getaway to the Maldives, a trip I had never booked to a destination I had never visited. For a woman who was supposedly just my husband's professional assistant, the $27,000 charge on my American Express account told a story I was not prepared to hear, but one that would transform me from a trusting wife into a strategic force that my husband David and his secretary Rebecca never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Victoria Matthews, and until that phone call on a Tuesday evening in March, I had been living what I believed was a successful marriage built on mutual respect, shared ambitions, and the kind of partnership that allowed both of us to thrive professionally while building something meaningful together. I was a senior marketing director at Global Tech Solutions, managing multi-million-dollar campaigns and leading teams across 3 continents. David was a commercial real estate attorney specializing in high-value acquisitions, representing clients whose property portfolios exceeded most people's lifetime earnings. Together, we had created what appeared to be the perfect combination of professional success and domestic harmony. The woman who answered that travel agent's call was someone who had spent 8 years building a marriage on the foundation of trust, communication, and shared financial responsibility. She was someone who believed that working 70-hour weeks while maintaining a loving relationship was not only possible but sustainable when both partners remained committed to transparency and mutual support. That woman was about to discover that her entire understanding of her marriage, her husband's character, and her own judgment had been systematically manipulated through a level of deception that would have impressed professional con artists. The phone call itself began innocuously enough. I was sitting in our home office, a space that David and I had designed together as a shared workspace where we could both handle client communications and administrative tasks during evening hours. The office represented everything we had built together, matching mahogany desks positioned to create collaborative energy, professional diplomas and achievement awards displayed with equal prominence, and shared filing systems that reflected our commitment to transparency in both financial and professional matters. When my phone rang at 7:23 p.m., the caller identification showed Prestige Travel International, a luxury travel agency that specialized in high-end vacation packages for affluent professionals. I assumed the call was related to the anniversary trip to Tuscany that David and I had been discussing for months, perhaps a follow-up to confirm details or address questions about our itinerary preferences. The conversation that followed would shatter every assumption I had maintained about my marriage and my husband's integrity. The travel agent, Ms. Patricia Williams, spoke with the practiced professionalism of someone accustomed to handling complex travel arrangements for demanding clients. Her tone was friendly but efficient as she explained that she was calling to confirm dietary restrictions and special accommodation requests for the Maldives resort package that had been charged to my credit card account. The booking, she explained, was for Mr. David Matthews and Ms. Rebecca Chen, with a departure date scheduled for the following week and accommodations at one of the most exclusive over-water villa resorts in the Indian Ocean. My initial response was confusion rather than alarm. I assumed that some administrative error had occurred, perhaps involving identity theft or credit card fraud, that had resulted in charges being applied to our account for services we had never requested. I politely explained to Ms. Williams that there must be some mistake, as neither my husband nor I had booked travel to the Maldives, and we certainly did not know anyone named Rebecca Chen who would be authorized to use our credit card for personal expenses. Ms. Williams paused for a moment, and I could hear the sound of computer keys as she apparently reviewed the booking details more carefully. When she returned to the conversation, her tone had shifted from routine professionalism to careful diplomacy, as if she had encountered this type of situation before and understood the delicate nature of what she was about to reveal. She explained that the booking had been made directly by Miss David Matthews, using credit card information that matched our account perfectly, and that he had specifically requested the romantic honeymoon package with upgraded accommodations and premium dining options. The word honeymoon struck me like a physical blow, creating a moment of cognitive dissonance that felt like my brain was struggling to process information that contradicted fundamental assumptions about reality. My immediate thought was that David must be planning some kind of surprise for our upcoming anniversary, perhaps involving a colleague or friend whose assistance he had enlisted in making arrangements. But as Williams continued reading from the booking confirmation, the details became impossible to rationalize through innocent explanation. The reservation included romantic couples massage treatments, private dining experiences designed for intimate celebrations, and specifically requested accommodations in the resort's most secluded overwater villa, complete with champagne service and rose petal arrangement. The booking confirmation listed David's personal email address, his direct office phone number, and his correct date of birth, eliminating any possibility that this was a case of mistaken identity or administrative error. Most damaging was the notation that Ms. Matthews had specifically requested that all correspondence about the trip be directed to an alternative email address associated with Rebecca Chen, ensuring that I would receive no advance notification about the travel arrangements. As I listened to Williams recite these details, my mind began processing the implications with the same analytical precision I applied to complex marketing campaigns. The level of detail and personalization in the booking demonstrated careful planning rather than impulsive decision-making. The financial arrangements showed access to our joint credit card account that David possessed but had never used for individual expenses without prior discussion. Most significantly, the coordination with Rebecca Chen suggested a relationship that extended far beyond the professional assistant role she occupied in David's law firm. I asked Williams to repeat the name Rebecca Chen, hoping that I had misunderstood or that there was some other explanation for her involvement in what appeared to be a romantic vacation booked by my husband. The travel agent confirmed that Chen was listed as the primary contact for all booking communications, that dietary restrictions had been noted for both travelers, and that special accommodations had been requested to ensure privacy and minimal interruption during their stay. The thorough nature of these arrangements indicated planning that had been underway for weeks or possibly months. Rebecca Chen was indeed David's secretary at Morrison, Blake & Associates, the prestigious law firm where he had worked for the past 5 years. I had met her on numerous occasions at firm social events, office holiday parties, and the occasional business dinner where spouses were included. She was an attractive woman in her early 30s with an MBA from Northwestern University, who had impressed me with her intelligence, professionalism, and apparent dedication to supporting David's increasingly demanding caseload. She had always been respectful in our interactions, asking thoughtful questions about my marketing work and expressing appropriate appreciation for the challenges of balancing two demanding careers within a marriage. The irony was not lost on me that I had actually appreciated Rebecca's presence in David's professional life, believing that her competence and reliability freed him from administrative burdens that might otherwise have required longer office hours or weekend work. I had viewed her as an asset to our marriage rather than a threat, someone whose professional support allowed David to maintain better work-life balance and spend more quality time focused on our relationship. The discovery that she was apparently involved in planning romantic getaways with my husband, using my financial resources, represented a betrayal that exceeded mere infidelity and entered the realm of calculated fraud. Williams seemed to recognize the emotional impact her revelations were having, and she offered to send me the complete booking confirmation along with all correspondence related to the travel arrangement. Her willingness to provide this documentation suggested that she had encountered similar situations before and understood that I would need comprehensive evidence to address what was clearly a serious breach of trust and financial responsibility. I accepted her offer and provided my personal email address, ensuring that David would have no advance warning that his travel arrangements had been exposed. As I ended the phone call with Ms. Williams, I sat in our shared office, surrounded by the symbols of what I had believed was a successful partnership, trying to process information that contradicted everything I thought I knew about my husband's character and our marriage's foundation. The mahogany desks that had represented collaborative success now felt like evidence of my own naivety. The jointly managed filing systems that had symbolized transparency now seemed like elaborate camouflage for activities I had been systematically excluded from understanding. The financial implications of the discovery were staggering beyond the immediate $27,000 charge. The booking confirmation that arrived in my email within minutes of ending the call with Williams revealed a level of luxury that exceeded any vacation David and I had ever taken together. The overwater villa accommodations cost more per night than our monthly mortgage payment. The premium dining and spa packages included services that we had never experienced even during our own honeymoon 8 years earlier. Most insulting was the discovery that David had apparently researched and selected the most expensive options available, using financial resources that I had contributed to building through years of disciplined saving and conservative spending. But beyond the financial fraud, the emotional betrayal represented a systematic deception that had been maintained over an extended period while David continued to present himself as a loving and committed husband. The romantic nature of the travel arrangements suggested a relationship with Rebecca that had progressed far beyond professional collaboration or casual infidelity. The careful coordination required to plan such an elaborate vacation while maintaining the pretense of normal marriage indicated a level of calculated dishonesty that called into question every interaction we had shared during recent months. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As I reviewed the booking confirmation in detail, I began to recognize patterns in David's recent behavior that I had previously attributed to work stress or the natural evolution of our relationship. His increased travel schedule, longer office hours, and decreased interest in planning vacation time together now appeared in a completely different context. The late evening phone calls that he claimed were urgent client communication, the weekend work sessions that supposedly required his presence at the office, and the social events that he attended without me all became potential evidence of a double life that had been carefully concealed from my awareness. Most psychologically devastating was the realization that I had not merely been deceived but had been actively manipulated into facilitating the deception. David had encouraged me to take on additional projects that required extended travel, suggesting that my career advancement should take priority over couple time during this particular phase of our lives. He had praised my dedication and professionalism while apparently using my absence to develop a relationship with Rebecca that had progressed to planning romantic vacations together. I had been working longer hours to build our shared financial security while unknowingly funding his affair with my own credit card. The woman who discovered that travel agent's call was someone who had believed that marriage was a partnership where both individuals worked together toward common goals, sharing both burdens and benefits equally. She had trusted that financial transparency was non-negotiable, that major decisions would be made collaboratively, and that any challenges in the relationship would be addressed through honest communication rather than secret arrangement. That woman had been living in a carefully constructed fantasy while the reality of her marriage involved systematic deception, financial fraud, and emotional manipulation. But something else was beginning to emerge from the shock and devastation of this discovery. The same analytical skills that had made me successful in developing complex marketing strategies could be applied to understanding and addressing the situation I now face. The attention to detail that had earned recognition in my professional career was now focused on examining every aspect of David's recent behavior and identifying additional evidence of deception. Most importantly, the determination that had driven my career advancement was beginning to redirect itself toward ensuring that this betrayal would not be suffered in silence or resolved through convenient compromise. The travel agent's questions had revealed more than just financial fraud and marital infidelity. They had exposed an elaborate deception that had been systematically planned and executed while I remained completely unaware of the reality of my own marriage. But they had also provided me with the first piece of evidence in what would become a comprehensive investigation into the true extent of David's betrayal and the scope of Rebecca's involvement in destroying what I had believed was a solid relationship. The woman who answered that phone call was about to discover that she possessed capabilities and resources that her husband and his secretary had dramatically underestimated. The same professional skills that had built successful marketing campaigns would soon be applied to dismantling the lies that had been constructed around her. The financial acumen that had contributed to building their shared wealth would be redirected toward protecting assets that David apparently viewed as available for his personal entertainment. Most importantly, the foundation of integrity and strategic thinking that had guided my professional success would now be applied to the most important project of my life, transforming devastating betrayal into personal empowerment and ensuring that those who had taken advantage of my trust would face consequences proportionate to their deception. The travel agent's questions had revealed the problem, but they had also provided the first tool for developing the solution. Before we continue with how this discovery led to the most strategic and satisfying response to betrayal that David and Rebecca never anticipated, I want to encourage you to subscribe and share this story with anyone who has ever faced the moment when trust is shattered and reality must be rebuilt. The journey from devastating discovery to ultimate empowerment will show you how the skills you already possess can be applied to challenges you never expected to face, and how the worst betrayals often become the foundation for the strongest versions of ourselves. The woman who received that travel agent's call was about to begin the most important work of her life, and she was far more prepared for the challenge than anyone involved could have anticipated. To understand how I would eventually transform David's betrayal into the most strategic victory of my life, you need to know about the foundation that was forged long before I ever met him. My story begins not in the comfortable suburbs of Chicago where we built our marriage, but in the industrial town of Gary, Indiana, where my mother Helen worked double shifts at the steel mill while raising 3 children alone after my father abandoned us when I was 12 years old. My mother was 28 years old when she found herself suddenly responsible for supporting our family on a single income that barely covered rent and groceries. The man she had married at 19, my father Rob, had decided that family responsibilities were incompatible with his dreams of becoming a professional musician, and he simply disappeared one Thursday morning while we were at school, leaving behind only a note explaining that he needed to follow his artistic vision without the burden of domestic obligation. My mother discovered his departure when she returned from her shift at the accounting firm where she worked as a bookkeeper, finding an empty closet and a checking account that had been drained to fund his escape. What followed was not collapse or self-pity, but the most systematic display of strategic thinking and resourcefulness I have ever witnessed. Within 48 hours of discovering my father's abandonment, my mother had enrolled in night classes at the community college to earn certification in industrial safety management, applied for a higher-paying position at the steel mill that would utilize her accounting background, and developed a household budget that accounted for every dollar while allocating funds for what she called investment in the future, which meant educational opportunities for her children. The transformation from abandoned housewife to industrial safety manager required my mother to master technical knowledge about metallurgy, equipment maintenance and federal safety regulations, while working full-time and maintaining our household. She would return home from 8-hour shifts at the mill covered in dust and exhaustion, then spend her evenings studying technical manuals and safety protocols with the same focused intensity that I would later apply to marketing analytics and strategic planning. Her determination to excel professionally while ensuring our family's stability taught me that circumstances do not determine outcomes when you possess the discipline to work systematically towards specific objectives. The financial discipline that governed our household during those years was extraordinary in its precision and effectiveness. Every expense was evaluated against our long-term goals rather than immediate convenience. My mother would spend hours comparing grocery prices between different stores, calculating the cost per use of potential purchases, and finding creative ways to provide experiences for us that we could not afford through traditional means. When I expressed interest in joining the debate team at school, she researched scholarship opportunities and transportation alternatives that would allow participation without compromising our budget. When my younger brother showed aptitude for mathematics, she arranged tutoring exchanges with neighbors who needed accounting assistance in exchange for academic support. But her most significant achievement was creating an environment where education was treated as the pathway to opportunities rather than merely academic obligation. Despite working physically demanding jobs that left her exhausted, my mother insisted that homework took precedence over household chores, that reading was more valuable than television entertainment, and that academic excellence was the foundation for economic independence. She would review our assignments with the same attention to detail she applied to safety inspections at the mill, asking probing questions that forced us to think critically about our work and develop higher standards for ourselves than our teachers required. The steel mill where my mother worked became my second classroom during the summers when childcare was not available. While other children attended camps or spent vacation time in recreational activities, I would accompany her to work and observe the complex operations that transformed raw materials into finished products through systematic processes and precise coordination. The experience taught me lessons about efficiency, quality control, and strategic planning that would prove invaluable in my later career in marketing and business development. Watching my mother navigate the male-dominated environment of industrial management showed me how competence could overcome bias when combined with strategic thinking and persistent effort. She was often the only woman in safety meetings with plant supervisors and union representatives, but her thorough preparation and comprehensive knowledge of regulations earned respect that transcended gender dynamics. She would spend hours researching technical solutions to operational challenges, developing presentations that demonstrated both the financial benefits and practical implementation of her recommendation. Her success in that environment taught me that excellence was the most effective response to skepticism and that thorough preparation could overcome almost any disadvantage. The promotion to Chief Safety Officer that my mother earned after 3 years at the mill represented more than professional advancement. It validated her strategic approach to transforming adversity into opportunity and demonstrated that systematic effort could produce results that seemed impossible when measured against initial circumstances. The salary increase allowed us to move from our cramped apartment to a modest house with dedicated study spaces for all 3 children. More importantly, her achievement provided concrete evidence that setbacks were temporary conditions rather than permanent limitations when addressed through disciplined effort and strategic thinking. During my high school years, my mother's example taught me that success required not merely hard work but intelligent work directed towards specific objectives. She would analyze my academic performance with the same systematic approach she applied to safety protocols, identifying areas where improvement was needed, and developing targeted strategies for addressing deficiency. When my mathematics grades suggested potential weakness that could limit college opportunities, she arranged additional tutoring and required that I demonstrate mastery of each concept before advancing to more complex material. Her intervention ensured that temporary struggles did not become permanent limitations. The college selection process reflected my mother's strategic approach to long-term planning and resource optimization. Rather than choosing universities based on prestige or social preferences, she researched programs that offered the best combination of academic quality, career placement rates, and financial assistance opportunity. The spreadsheets she created comparing different institutions included variables such as average starting salaries for graduates, alumni network strength, and total cost of attendance over 4 years. Her analysis led to my enrollment at Northwestern University, where the marketing program offered exceptional industry connections and the financial aid package made attendance possible without accumulating overwhelming debt. The transition from Gary, Indiana to Northwestern University represented a cultural and economic leap that required adaptation strategies my mother had not personally experienced but helped me develop through systematic preparation. She researched social dynamics at selective universities, professional networking principles, and the presentation skills that would be necessary for success in competitive academic and career environments. The wardrobe she assembled for my freshman year was purchased through careful shopping at outlet stores and end-of-season sales, creating a professional appearance that would allow me to participate confidently in any social or academic setting. But her most valuable gift was the psychological foundation she had built through her example of transforming abandonment into empowerment. The woman who had been devastated by my father's betrayal had systematically rebuilt her life into something stronger and more secure than what had been destroyed. She had taught me that external circumstances, no matter how challenging, could be overcome through strategic thinking, persistent effort, and refusal to accept temporary setbacks as permanent limitation. Most importantly,
she had demonstrated that the skills required for survival could be transformed into the tools for success when applied with intelligence and determination. The work ethic that propelled me through Northwestern and into my marketing career was built on the foundation my mother had established during those formative years in Gary. The analytical skills that made me successful in developing complex campaigns were refined versions of the systematic approach she had applied to household management and professional advancement. The confidence that allowed me to excel in competitive corporate environments was grounded in her demonstration that competence and preparation could overcome any initial disadvantage. When I met David during my second year at Morrison & Associates, the consulting firm where I worked before joining Global Tech Solutions, I was attracted to his apparent stability, professional ambition, and commitment to building something substantial together. His background as the son of successful attorneys seemed to complement my own drive for achievement, and his established career in commercial real estate law offered the kind of security that my childhood had taught me to value highly. The partnership we developed appeared to combine the best elements of professional compatibility and personal connection. The 8 years of marriage that followed represented what I believed was the successful application of strategic thinking to personal relationships. We had established clear communication protocols for managing dual careers, developed shared financial objectives that reflected both our individual goals and collective aspirations, and created a domestic environment that supported both professional advancement and personal satisfaction. The trust that characterized our relationship was built on consistent behavior, transparent communication, and mutual respect for each other's contributions to our shared success. But the foundation my mother had built during those difficult years in Gary had taught me lessons about resilience that extended beyond conventional relationship dynamics. She had shown me that the most devastating betrayals often revealed the true character of both the perpetrator and the victim, and that survival required strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction. The skills she had developed for transforming adversity into opportunity were now part of my psychological toolkit, even though I had never anticipated needing to apply them to my marriage. The woman who discovered David's travel arrangements with Rebecca was devastated by the betrayal, but she was also the daughter of someone who had faced equally impossible circumstances and had systematically developed the capabilities needed to overcome them. The same analytical mind that had built successful marketing campaigns could be applied to understanding and addressing the situation I now face. The attention to detail that had contributed to professional recognition would be redirected toward examining every aspect of David's deception and developing comprehensive strategies for response. Most important, the foundation of integrity and determination that my mother had instilled during those formative years had taught me that external validation was less important than internal strength, that reputation was less significant than character, and that temporary defeats were acceptable as long as you continued moving toward your ultimate objectives. These lessons would prove invaluable as I faced professional destruction that might have permanently discouraged someone with a more conventional background. The steel mill where my mother had worked became a metaphor for the transformation process I was about to undertake. Just as raw materials were subjected to intense heat and pressure to create products stronger than their original form, the betrayal I had discovered would become the catalyst for developing capabilities and resilience that exceeded anything I had previously possessed. The same systematic approach that had enabled my mother to transform abandonment into empowerment would now be applied to converting David's deception into the foundation for my own strategic victory.
The financial acumen that had been developed through years of careful resource management in our household would be essential for understanding the full scope of David's fraudulent activity and protecting assets that he apparently viewed as available for his personal entertainment. The professional networking skills that had been refined through years of corporate advancement would be crucial for building the alliances and support systems necessary for comprehensive response to his betrayal. The strategic thinking that had been honed through complex marketing campaigns would be applied to developing plans that addressed both immediate protection and long-term empowerment. But perhaps most importantly, the psychological foundation that my mother had built through her example of resilience had taught me that the most powerful position was often the one that appeared most vulnerable. because underestimation by opponents created opportunities for strategic advantage that they would never anticipate or prepare for effectively. The woman who had been betrayed by her husband was about to discover that she possessed resources and capabilities that both David and Rebecca had dramatically underestimated, and that their confidence in her passivity would become the foundation for their comprehensive defeat. The foundation was solid, built through years of systematic preparation and tested through challenges that had revealed its strength and reliability. The steel had been forged through heat and pressure, creating material that was stronger and more resilient than anything that had come before. Now it was time to discover what could be constructed with those materials under circumstances that would demand everything my mother had taught me about transformation, strategy, and the power of systematic thinking applied to seemingly impossible challenges. The woman who received that travel agent's call was about to begin the most important work of her life, and she was far better prepared for the challenge than anyone involved could have possibly anticipated. The 12 hours following Patricia Williams' phone call transformed our home from a sanctuary of shared success into a crime scene where I methodically documented evidence of systematic deception. The shock that had initially paralyzed my thinking gradually gave way to the analytical precision that had characterized my most successful marketing campaigns, as I began applying professional investigative techniques to the most personal betrayal of my life. Every surface that had once represented domestic harmony now became a potential source of information about the elaborate fraud that David and Rebecca had constructed while I remained completely unaware of their coordinated efforts to exploit my trust and financial resources. I began my investigation in our shared office, the space where David and I had supposedly maintained complete transparency about professional obligations, financial commitments, and personal goals. The mahogany filing cabinets that had once symbolized organized collaboration now seemed like potential repositories for documents that might reveal additional evidence of deception. I approached each drawer with the systematic methodology I applied to market research projects, photographing the contents before examination to ensure that any subsequent attempts at concealment would be documented and preserved. The financial records contained in our supposedly joint filing system revealed patterns of activity that contradicted every conversation we had shared about budgeting, spending priorities, and long-term financial planning. Hidden among legitimate business expenses and household bills were credit card statements for accounts I had never seen before, showing charges at luxury restaurants during times when David claimed to be working late at the office, purchases at high-end jewelry stores that had never resulted in gifts for me, and cash advances that seemed to correspond with Rebecca's known vacation days from the law firm. The most damning discovery came in the form of a leather portfolio tucked behind our shared tax documents, containing printed emails between David and Rebecca that revealed a relationship extending back nearly 18 months before the Maldives book. The correspondence documented not merely romantic involvement but coordinated financial planning that treated our joint assets as resources available for their shared entertainment. Rebecca's messages referenced our home as your temporary situation and discussed timeline considerations for David's eventual departure from what she characterized as his transitional arrangement with me. The cold calculation revealed in their written communication was more devastating than simple infidelity because it demonstrated that my marriage had been viewed as a temporary convenience rather than a meaningful commitment. David's responses to Rebecca's questions about our finances included detailed information about my salary, savings contributions, and investment portfolio, apparently shared to reassure her that adequate resources existed to support their long-term plans together. The discovery that my professional success had been discussed between them as an asset to be exploited rather than an achievement to be celebrated represented a fundamental violation of trust that extended far beyond romantic betrayal. Reading through months of their correspondence required emotional discipline that drew heavily on the psychological foundation my mother had built during her own crisis years earlier. Each message revealed additional layers of deception and manipulation, but I forced myself to approach the evidence with the same objective analysis I would apply to competitor research or market intelligence gathering. The pain was overwhelming, but the information was invaluable for understanding the true scope of what I was facing and developing appropriate response strategies. The technical sophistication of their deception became apparent as I examined the coordination required to maintain their relationship while preserving the illusion of normal marriage. They had established separate communication channels, through encrypted messaging applications, coordinated their schedules to maximize time together while minimizing risk of discovery, and developed elaborate alibis that involved cooperation from colleagues at David's law firm who apparently viewed their affair as an amusing workplace drama rather than systematic fraud against an unsuspecting spouse. The financial analysis I conducted using spreadsheet techniques, developed through years of budget management, revealed that David had systematically transferred funds from our joint accounts to finance activities with Rebecca that exceeded $20,000 over the preceding 6 months. The transfers had been carefully structured to avoid triggering automatic alerts or appearing unusual when reviewed casually, but comprehensive analysis revealed a clear pattern of resource diversion that constituted theft under any reasonable definition of marital financial responsibility. The psychological impact of discovering such elaborate betrayal was initially overwhelming, but my mother's example of transforming abandonment in empowerment provided a framework for processing the emotional devastation while maintaining focus on practical response strategy. The same woman who had been devastated by my father's departure had systematically rebuilt her life through methodical analysis of her situation, strategic planning for improvement, and persistent execution of carefully developed plans. Those lessons now became essential tools for navigating circumstances that seemed equally impossible but actually contained opportunities for transformation that my mother's experience had prepared me to recognize and explore. Sleep became impossible as my mind raced through the implications of what I had discovered and the range of possible responses available to me. The comfortable bedroom that David and I had shared for 8 years now felt contaminated by the knowledge that he had been planning his departure while maintaining intimate physical and emotional connection with me. Every conversation we had shared during recent months now seemed like performance art designed to maintain access to financial resources, while he developed alternative arrangements with Rebecca. The most psychologically damaging aspect of the discovery was recognizing how thoroughly I had been manipulated into facilitating my own betrayal. David had encouraged my acceptance of additional travel assignments that required extended absence from home, praising my professional dedication while apparently using my absence to spend uninterrupted time with Rebecca. He had supported my decision to increase contributions to our joint savings account, expressing appreciation for my fiscal responsibility while secretly accessing those funds to finance romantic activities with his secretary. Every sacrifice I had made to strengthen our marriage had been exploited to weaken my position and strengthen his alternative. The practical implications of the betrayal extended far beyond emotional devastation into areas that would require immediate strategic response to prevent additional damage. Our joint credit card accounts remained vulnerable to further unauthorized charges. Our shared savings could be accessed by David at any time, and our jointly held investments could be liquidated without my knowledge or consent. The financial exposure I faced required immediate protective action, but any premature moves might alert David to my discovery and eliminate opportunities for gathering additional evidence or implementing comprehensive response strategies. The legal consultation I arranged for the following morning confirmed my worst fears about the complexity of addressing financial fraud within marriage, while preserving options for comprehensive justice. The attorney I contacted, Margaret Foster, specialized in complex divorce cases involving high-asset couples and financial misconduct. Her preliminary assessment indicated that David's unauthorized use of our joint credit card for personal entertainment with another woman constituted both marital misconduct and potentially criminal fraud, but that proving intentional deception would require evidence demonstrating systematic planning and coordination with Rebecca. Margaret's analysis of the correspondence I had discovered revealed that David and Rebecca had been remarkably careless in their written communication, apparently confident that I would never gain access to their private exchange. The detailed discussions of our financial situation, their long-term plans for living together, and their timeline for ending my marriage provided exactly the type of evidence needed to support claims for financial compensation beyond standard divorce settlement. Their overconfidence in my passivity had created a documentary record that would prove invaluable in any legal proceeding. But Margaret also warned that David's legal training and professional connections within the Chicago legal community would provide him with significant advantages in any divorce proceeding. His understanding of asset protection strategies, discovery procedures and negotiation tactics, would require equally sophisticated opposition to achieve favorable outcome. The recommendation was to gather comprehensive evidence before initiating any formal legal action, ensuring that the full scope of his deception was documented and preserved before he became aware that his activities had been discovered. The investigative strategy we developed drew heavily on techniques I had mastered during competitive analysis projects in my marketing career. The same methodologies to understand competitor strategies, market positioning, and resource allocation could be applied to documenting David's deception and building a comprehensive case for maximum financial recovery and legal consequence. The key was maintaining complete secrecy about my discovery while systematically gathering evidence that would support the strongest possible legal position. The immediate practical challenges included maintaining normal domestic routines while conducting detailed investigation, protecting our joint financial assets without alerting David to my concerns, and gathering additional evidence about Rebecca's involvement without revealing that their correspondence had been discovered. Each interaction with David required careful performance to avoid triggering suspicion, while I worked systematically to understand the full scope of their plans and the extent of damage they had already caused to our financial security. The most difficult aspect of this initial period was the necessity of continuing intimate physical and emotional connection with David while knowing that he was actively planning to abandon our marriage for a relationship with Rebecca. The psychological discipline required to maintain normal marital behavior while gathering evidence of systematic betrayal drew heavily on the emotional resilience my mother had demonstrated during her own crisis. The same determination that had enabled her to rebuild her life after my father's abandonment now provided the foundation for systematic response to circumstances that initially seemed overwhelming but actually contained opportunities for comprehensive victory. The transformation that began during those first 12 hours represented more than mere reaction to betrayal. The analytical skills that had been developed through years of professional success were now being applied to the most important project of my life, with stakes that exceeded any marketing campaign or business development initiative. The attention to detail that had earned recognition in corporate environments was being redirected toward documenting deception with the precision required for legal proceedings that could determine financial security for years to come. The woman who had discovered David's travel arrangements was evolving into someone whose capabilities far exceeded what either David or Rebecca had anticipated when they planned their elaborate deception. The same strategic thinking that had built successful marketing campaigns was being applied to developing response strategies that would address both immediate protection and long-term empowerment. The financial acumen that had contributed to building our shared wealth was being redirected toward preserving assets that David apparently viewed as available for his personal entertainment with Rebecca. Most importantly, the foundation of integrity and determination that my mother had instilled was asserting itself over the initial shock and emotional devastation. The systematic approach that had enabled her transformation from abandoned housewife to successful professional was now being applied to converting David's betrayal into the opportunity for my own strategic advancement. The steel that had been forged through years of disciplined thinking and persistent effort was about to be tested under circumstances that would reveal its true strength and versatility. The immediate aftermath was devastating in its revelation of systematic deception, but it was also empowering in its demonstration that I possessed the analytical capabilities and emotional resilience necessary to address challenges that initially seemed insurmountable. The evidence I had gathered during those first 12 hours provided the foundation for comprehensive response strategies that would ensure David and Rebecca faced consequences proportionate to their elaborate fraud. The investigation was just beginning, but the preliminary findings confirmed that their confidence in my passivity represented a fundamental miscalculation that would become the source of their ultimate defeat. The woman who had been betrayed was transforming into someone whose strategic capabilities exceeded anything her opponents had anticipated or prepared to address. The real work was about to begin, and I was discovering that I was far better equipped for this challenge than anyone involved could have possibly imagined.
The third week following my discovery of David's travel arrangements marked the beginning of what I now recognize as the most psychologically demanding period of my adult life. The initial shock had crystallized into a deeper understanding of the systematic deception that had characterized my marriage for at least 18 months, and the full implications of that realization created a darkness that penetrated every aspect of my daily existence. The comfortable routines that had structured our domestic life became elaborate performances designed to conceal my growing knowledge while I gathered additional evidence and developed comprehensive response strategies. The psychological toll of maintaining normal marital behavior while knowing that David was actively planning to abandon our marriage for a relationship with Rebecca required emotional discipline that exceeded anything I had previously experienced. Every conversation became a careful balance between gathering information and avoiding suspicion. Every display of affection felt like betrayal of my own intelligence and self-respect. Every shared meal, every evening spent watching television together, every moment of physical intimacy occurred within the context of knowledge that transformed familiar interactions into painful reminders of how thoroughly I had been manipulated. Sleep became increasingly elusive as my mind processed the evidence I had gathered and explored the implications of various response strategies. The bedroom that had once represented intimacy and partnership now felt like enemy territory where I was required to perform vulnerability while maintaining constant vigilance about information that might inadvertently be revealed through unguarded comments or questions. The physical proximity to someone who had systematically betrayed my trust while planning my eventual abandonment created a state of psychological tension that manifested in physical symptoms, including persistent headaches, digestive problems, and the kind of nervous energy that made concentration on routine tasks nearly impossible. The professional demands of my position at Global Tech Solutions provided temporary refuge from the emotional chaos of my domestic situation, but even that sanctuary became compromised as I struggled to maintain the focus and strategic thinking that had characterized my marketing career. Complex campaigns that had previously energized my analytical capabilities now seemed trivial compared to the investigation I was conducting into my own merit. Client presentations that had once showcased my expertise in market analysis and strategic planning felt hollow when delivered by someone whose personal judgment had been so thoroughly deceived by the person closest to her. The isolation that accompanied my discovery was perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of the entire experience. The carefully constructed social network that David and I had developed over 8 years of marriage was suddenly revealed as a collection of relationships that were fundamentally superficial and contingent on our continued appearance as a successful couple. Friends who had praised our partnership and expressed admiration for our professional compatibility would inevitably view the revelation of David's betrayal as evidence of my failure to maintain my marriage rather than his systematic deception and financial fraud. The financial implications of David's betrayal continued to expand as my investigation revealed additional evidence of unauthorized spending and resource manipulation. Beyond the $27,000 Maldives booking that had triggered my initial discovery, comprehensive analysis of our financial records revealed a pattern of smaller expenditures that collectively represented significant theft from our joint resource. Expensive dinners during my business travel, luxury hotel accommodations during supposed work conferences, and premium gifts that had never been shared with me created a financial trail that documented systematic exploitation of my professional success to fund his relationship with Rebecca. The legal consultation with Margaret Foster had provided a framework for understanding my options, but the complexity of proving financial fraud within marriage while preserving maximum strategic advantage required patience and systematic evidence gathering that tested my emotional resilience on a daily basis. The knowledge that David's legal training provided him with significant advantages in any confrontation created additional pressure to ensure that my preparation was comprehensive and my execution was flawless. Any premature action or strategic error could result in legal consequences that would compound the emotional and financial damage he had already caused. The most psychologically devastating discovery came through my analysis of David's email correspondence with colleagues at Morrison, Blake and Associates. The messages revealed that his relationship with Rebecca was not merely known within the firm but actively supported by partners and associates who viewed his marriage to me as an impediment to his professional advancement and social acceptability within their elite legal community. The casual references to my middle-class background and state university education as limitations on David's career prospects demonstrated that my systematic exclusion from firm social events had been deliberate rather than coincidental. Reading discussions about my supposed incompatibility with the sophisticated social environment that David's career required was more humiliating than discovering his romantic involvement with Rebecca. The revelation that I had been evaluated and found wanting by people I had never met, based on criteria I had never been given the opportunity to address, transformed my understanding of recent years when David had increasingly attended professional functions without me. His explanations about client confidentiality requirements and the inappropriate nature of spouse attendance at certain firm events now appeared as elaborate strategies for avoiding the embarrassment my presence would supposedly create. The coordination between David and his colleagues in maintaining the fiction of his marriage while facilitating his relationship with Rebecca revealed a level of institutional complicity that exceeded individual betrayal and entered the realm of systematic exclusion and social manipulation. The same legal professionals who counseled clients about fiduciary responsibility and ethical obligation had apparently collaborated in helping David exploit our joint financial resources while planning the termination of our marriage without my knowledge or consent. The psychological impact. Recognizing how thoroughly I had been excluded from David's professional community was compounded by the realization that my own career success had been consistently minimized and undermined through subtle comments and suggestions that redirected attention away from my achievements toward his supposed professional superiority. The marketing campaigns I had developed for global tech solutions, which had generated millions of dollars in revenue and earned industry recognition, had been dismissed in social settings as corporate communications work rather than strategic business development. My leadership of cross-functional teams and successful management of complex client relationships had been characterized as administrative support rather than executive responsibility. The systematic diminishment of my professional accomplishments within our social circle now appeared as deliberate preparation for David's eventual departure, creating a narrative that would make his abandonment of our marriage seem reasonable rather than cruel. The woman he would be leaving behind had been carefully portrayed as someone whose limited sophistication and professional capabilities had become impediments to his continued advancement, rather than someone whose success had actually contributed to building the financial foundation he was now exploiting to finance his relationship with Rebecca. But something profound was occurring during these darkest weeks that I was only beginning to recognize and understand: the complete destruction of my illusions about David's character and our marriage was creating psychological space for capabilities and perspectives that had been suppressed by years of attempting to conform to expectations that were fundamentally designed to minimize my potential rather than maximize. The woman who had been devastated by the discovery of systematic betrayal was slowly being replaced by someone who understood that the constraints of her marriage had actually prevented her from developing and expressing her full range of capability. The analytical skills that I had applied to marketing campaigns were now being directed toward understanding human psychology, strategic deception, and the complex dynamics of power and manipulation that had characterized my marriage without my awareness. The financial acumen that had contributed to building our joint resources was being refined through detailed analysis of David's fraud and the development of protective strategies that would preserve my assets while maximizing his legal and financial consequences. The leadership capabilities that had earned recognition in my professional career were being expanded through the necessity of coordinating complex investigation while maintaining operational security and strategic advantage. The isolation that had initially seemed so devastating was gradually revealing itself as liberation from social obligations and relationship dynamics that had required constant performance rather than authentic expression. The absence of David's subtle criticism and correction was allowing me to rediscover aspects of my personality that had been gradually suppressed through years of attempting to meet standards that were actually designed to maintain his psychological superiority rather than improve our partnership. The evening routines that had once involved collaborative meal preparation and shared entertainment were now spent in systematic analysis of evidence, strategic planning for various response scenarios, and research into legal precedents for cases involving financial fraud within marriage. The intellectual engagement required for this work was more stimulating and satisfying than any conversation I had shared with David during recent months, revealing that the domestic tranquility I had believed we were maintaining had actually been intellectual stagnation disguised as marital harmony. The physical changes that accompanied this psychological transformation were subtle but significant. The chronic tension headaches that had plagued me for months began to subside as I stopped trying to reconcile conflicting information about David's behavior and accepted the evidence of systematic deception. The digestive problems that I had attributed to work stress improved dramatically once I began eating meals alone rather than sitting across from someone who was actively planning my financial exploitation. The nervous energy that had made concentration difficult was gradually being channeled into focused investigation and strategic planning that produced tangible results and measurable progress toward comprehensive resolution. The professional recognition I received during this period confirmed that my marketing capabilities were actually enhanced rather than diminished by the psychological clarity that accompanied my discovery of David's betrayal. The campaign proposals I developed for Global Tech Solutions demonstrated increased sophistication in understanding client psychology and competitive dynamics. The presentations I delivered to executive leadership showed improved strategic thinking and more confident decision-making than I had displayed during previous performance reviews. The realization that my professional success had been achieved despite rather than because of my marriage provided validation that my capabilities were both authentic and portable across different circumstances. The dark period that had initially seemed like the destruction of everything I had built was gradually revealing itself as the clearing away of illusions that had actually limited my potential for achievement and satisfaction. The marriage that I had believed provided stability and partnership had actually required constant self-modification and strategic diminishment to maintain David's psychological comfort and social acceptability. The financial partnership that I had thought represented shared goals and mutual support had actually been systematic exploitation of my professional success to fund lifestyle choices and relationship activities that excluded me completely. The woman who had been devastated by the discovery of David's travel arrangements was being replaced by someone who understood that the betrayal had actually freed her from constraints that had prevented full development of her capabilities and authentic expression of her personality. The skills that had been developed through years of professional success were now being applied to the most important project of her life, with stakes that exceeded any marketing campaign or business development initiative.
The foundation that had been built through her mother's example of transforming abandonment into empowerment was providing the psychological framework for converting systematic betrayal into comprehensive strategic advantage. The darkness was real and the pain was overwhelming. But both were temporary conditions that would pass when I completed the systematic dismantling of David's deception and implemented response strategies that would ensure appropriate consequences for his elaborate fraud. The same analytical capabilities that had identified patterns in market data were now being applied to understanding the psychology of betrayal and the strategic requirements for achieving justice, rather than merely survival. The dark period was ending, and what was emerging was someone whose capabilities had been refined through adversity into tools that were far more sophisticated and powerful than anything David or Rebecca had anticipated when they planned their systematic exploitation of my trust and financial resources. The real work was about to begin, and I was discovering that I was extraordinarily well prepared for challenges that would have overwhelmed the woman I had been before this transformation began. The pivotal moment came during my 4th week of investigation, not through dramatic revelation but through the methodical analysis that had always characterized my approach to complex business challenges. I was cross-referencing David's credit card statements with his claimed work schedule when I discovered a pattern that seemed insignificant but represented a fundamental flaw in the elaborate deception he and Rebecca had constructed. The precision of their coordination had created digital footprints that revealed the systematic nature of their fraud while simultaneously providing the evidence necessary to expose their activities comprehensively. The breakthrough occurred while I was analyzing expense reports that David had submitted to Morrison, Blake and Associates for reimbursement of client entertainment and business development activities. His law firm maintained sophisticated accounting systems that required detailed documentation for all billable expenses, including timestamps, client codes, and business justifications for each expenditure. The same attention to detail that protected the firm from tax liability and client billing disputes had created an audit trail that contradicted the personal expenses David had charged to our joint credit card accounts during identical time periods. The specific discrepancy that triggered my analysis involved a dinner charge of $437 at Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, on an evening when David had claimed to be entertaining the senior partners from Henderson Development Group regarding their proposed acquisition of commercial properties in the River North District. His expense report to the law firm documented this business dinner with appropriate client codes and professional justification. However, our credit card statement showed an identical charge at the same restaurant on the same evening, suggesting that David had billed both his employer and our personal account for the same meal. Further investigation revealed that this pattern of double billing extended across multiple months and involved dozens of transactions that had been systematically charged to both professional and personal accounts. David had apparently discovered that careful timing and documentation could allow him to receive reimbursement from his law firm for legitimate business expenses, while simultaneously charging our joint credit card for identical activities conducted with Rebecca. The sophistication of this fraud exceeded simple romantic deception and entered the realm of professional misconduct that could result in criminal charges and disbarment proceedings. The revelation that David had been defrauding both his employer and our marriage simultaneously provided crucial insights into the psychology underlying his systematic betrayal. This was not merely a romantic affair that had spiraled into financial deception, but evidence of someone whose ethical framework had deteriorated to the point where sophisticated fraud was considered an acceptable method for maintaining multiple relationships while avoiding financial consequences. The same legal training that should have made him acutely aware of fiduciary responsibilities and professional ethics had instead been applied to developing increasingly elaborate methods for exploiting institutional trust and personal relationships. The documentation I discovered revealed that Rebecca had been a willing participant in this professional fraud rather than merely the beneficiary of David's personal financial deception. Email correspondence between them included detailed discussions about which restaurants accepted corporate credit cards, which business events provided opportunities for personal entertainment, and which client meetings could be extended to include romantic activities that would appear legitimate on expense reports. Her MBA training and administrative experience within the law firm had apparently been applied to optimizing their fraud rather than supporting legitimate business operations. This discovery transformed my understanding of the challenge I faced from personal betrayal to comprehensive criminal activity that required sophisticated response strategies extending far beyond divorce proceedings. The evidence I had gathered documented not only marital misconduct and financial fraud but professional ethics violations that could result in David's disbarment and potential criminal prosecution. The scope of their coordination suggested systematic planning that had been underway for significantly longer than their 18-month romantic relationship, indicating that the professional fraud may have preceded and enabled their personal involvement. The strategic implications of this breakthrough were profound because it provided leverage that David had not anticipated when he planned his elaborate deception. His legal career represented the foundation of his professional identity and financial security, and the evidence of systematic fraud against his employer created vulnerabilities that extended far beyond our marital relationship. The same institutional connections that he had viewed as advantages in any divorce proceeding would become liabilities once his professional misconduct was exposed to partners at Morrison, Blake and Associates and relevant Bar Association disciplinary committee. The psychological impact of understanding the true scope of David's deception was initially overwhelming, but it also provided the clarity needed to develop response strategies that matched the sophistication of his fraud. The woman who had been devastated by discovering romantic betrayal was being replaced by someone who understood that she was dealing with systematic criminal activity that required equally systematic opposition. The skills that had been developed through years of competitive market analysis were now being applied to understanding criminal psychology and developing strategies for comprehensive accountability rather than mere personal vindication. The investigative methodology I developed during this period drew heavily on techniques used in corporate intelligence gathering and competitive analysis. The same systematic approach that had revealed market opportunities and competitor vulnerabilities could be applied to documenting criminal activity and building cases for maximum legal consequence. The attention to detail that had earned recognition in my marketing career was now being directed toward creating evidence portfolios that would withstand scrutiny from experienced defense attorneys and sophisticated legal challenges. The transformation that began with this breakthrough represented more than expanded understanding of David's betrayal. The analytical capabilities that had been constrained by the assumptions and limitations of our marriage were now being applied without restriction to challenges that demanded every aspect of my professional expertise. The financial acumen that had been directed toward building our joint resources was being redirected toward protecting assets while maximizing consequences for those who had systematically exploited my trust and professional success. The confidence that emerged from this deeper understanding was different from the professional assurance I had developed through marketing achievement. This was the confidence that comes from recognizing that your capabilities are adequate for addressing challenges that initially seemed overwhelming, and that systematic preparation can create advantages over opponents who have underestimated both your resources and your determination. The woman who had been victimized was evolving into someone whose strategic thinking exceeded what David or Rebecca had anticipated when they planned their elaborate fraud. The legal consultation with Margaret Foster confirmed that the evidence of professional fraud significantly strengthened my position in any divorce proceeding while creating opportunities for additional civil and criminal remedy. Her analysis indicated that David's systematic defrauding of his employer while using our joint resources to finance his relationship with Rebecca constituted multiple violations of both professional ethics and criminal law. The evidence I had gathered provided the foundation for complaints to bar disciplinary committees, criminal referrals to appropriate prosecutors, and civil suits for recovery of fraudulently obtained resources. More importantly, Margaret's assessment revealed that David's legal training, which I had initially viewed as a disadvantage in any confrontation, would actually become a liability once his professional misconduct was exposed. Attorneys who commit ethical violations face significantly harsher consequences than other professionals because the legal system depends on public trust in the integrity of its practitioners. The same institutional connections that might have protected David in a conventional divorce proceeding would abandon him once evidence of systematic fraud became public knowledge within the Chicago legal community. The strategic planning that followed this breakthrough required coordination across multiple areas of expertise including criminal law, professional ethics, civil litigation, and financial recovery. The complexity of addressing David's fraud comprehensively exceeded what any individual could manage effectively, but my business development experience had taught me how to build teams of specialists who could coordinate their efforts toward common objectives. The same project management skills that had successfully managed complex marketing campaigns could be applied to orchestrating legal responses that addressed every aspect of David's systematic deception. The psychological discipline required to maintain normal domestic routines while developing comprehensive response strategies drew heavily on lessons learned during my mother's transformation years earlier. Her example of systematic planning and patient execution provided the framework for managing the emotional stress of continued proximity to David while building the case that would ensure appropriate consequences for his elaborate fraud. The same determination that had enabled her to rebuild her life after abandonment was now providing the foundation for converting betrayal into strategic advantage. The investigation techniques I refined during this period represented a synthesis of corporate research methodologies and criminal evidence gathering that exceeded anything I had previously attempted. The systematic documentation of David's activities required the same attention to detail used in market research combined with the precision needed for legal proceedings. The pattern analysis that revealed the scope of his fraud drew on statistical techniques developed through years of campaign analytics, applied to understanding criminal behavior and coordination between multiple perpetrators. The evidence portfolio that emerged from this investigation provided comprehensive documentation of systematic fraud extending across professional and personal relationships over a period exceeding 2. The financial analysis revealed theft from our joint resources totaling more than $60,000 when all unauthorized expenditures were calculated and verified. The professional misconduct documentation included expense report fraud, client billing irregularities, and coordination with Rebecca that violated multiple aspects of legal ethics and fiduciary responsibility. The technological sophistication of the evidence gathering reflected expertise developed through years of digital marketing and analytics work, applied to understanding communication patterns and financial transactions. The same tools used for customer relationship management and campaign tracking could be applied to documenting criminal coordination and establishing timelines for systematic fraud. The data visualization techniques that had made complex market information accessible to executive decision-makers were now being used to present evidence in formats that would be compelling to attorneys, prosecutors, and disciplinary committees. The strategic timing for revealing this evidence required careful consideration of multiple factors including legal procedures, professional disciplinary processes, and personal safety consideration. The coordination between different remedy options needed to maximize pressure on David, while preserving opportunities for comprehensive resolution across all areas where he had committed fraud or violated professional obligation. The same project scheduling techniques used in marketing campaign launches could be applied to coordinating legal actions that would prevent David from implementing defensive strategies or concealing additional evidence. The woman who had discovered the pattern in David's expense reports was no longer someone who could be deceived or manipulated through sophisticated fraud. The analytical capabilities that had been constrained by the assumptions of marriage were now being applied without limitation to challenges that demanded every aspect of her professional expertise. The foundation that had been built through years of business success was providing the framework for achieving justice that exceeded what David had anticipated when he planned his systematic betrayal. The breakthrough had revealed not only the scope of David's deception but the extent of my own capabilities when applied to challenges that required comprehensive strategic response. The skills that had been developed through competitive market analysis were proving equally effective for understanding criminal psychology and developing opposition strategy. The confidence that had been earned through professional achievement was being validated through systematic investigation that revealed crimes exceeding anything I had initially suspected. The first breakthrough was complete, and what emerged was someone whose capabilities far exceeded what either David or Rebecca had anticipated when they planned their elaborate fraud. The real work was beginning, and I was discovering that I was extraordinarily well prepared for challenges that would require every aspect of the expertise I had developed through years of professional success, applied to the most important project of my life. The systematic investigation that followed my breakthrough discovery of David's professional fraud required the development of methodologies that combined corporate intelligence techniques with criminal evidence standards. The scope of documentation needed to support comprehensive legal action across multiple jurisdictions demanded organizational systems that could track evidence across professional misconduct, financial fraud, and marital betrayal simultaneously. The challenge exceeded anything I had previously managed in my marketing career, but the analytical framework I had developed through years of competitive research provided the foundation for building an investigation that would meet the evidentiary requirements of both civil litigation and criminal prosecution. The evidence management system I established drew heavily on project management techniques developed through complex marketing campaigns that required coordination across multiple departments and external vendors. The same systematic approach that had successfully launched integrated marketing initiatives across digital platforms, traditional media, and direct client engagement
could be applied to organizing evidence portfolios that would support legal proceedings in family court, professional disciplinary hearings, and potential criminal trials. The attention to detail that had earned recognition for campaign execution was now being directed toward creating documentation that would withstand scrutiny from experienced defense attorneys and judicial review. The initial phase of expanded investigation focused on establishing the complete timeline of David's financial fraud and professional misconduct. The double billing pattern I had discovered represented only the visible portion of systematic deception that had apparently been refined over multiple years of practice. The expense report analysis revealed increasingly sophisticated methods for exploiting institutional trust and professional relationships, suggesting that David's ethical deterioration had been gradual rather than sudden, with each successful fraud creating confidence for more elaborate schemes. The financial reconstruction required forensic accounting techniques that exceeded my existing expertise, but could be learned through the same systematic approach I had applied to mastering digital marketing analytics and customer relationship management systems. The principles underlying financial fraud investigation were conceptually similar to market research methodologies, involving pattern recognition, data correlation, and statistical analysis applied to understanding human behavior and decision-making processes. The same intellectual curiosity that had driven my professional development could be redirected toward understanding criminal psychology and evidential requirements for successful prosecution. The technological tools needed for comprehensive investigation were more sophisticated than standard business applications, but remained accessible to someone with experience in data analysis and digital research. The financial tracking software used by forensic accountants employed similar algorithms to customer analytics platforms, while criminal investigation databases operated on search principles comparable to competitive intelligence systems. The learning curve was significant, but manageable for someone whose career had required constant adaptation to evolving technological platforms and analytical methodology. The coordination with legal counsel revealed that the evidence I had gathered provided sufficient foundation for multiple parallel proceedings that would address different aspects of David's systematic fraud. Margaret Foster's analysis indicated that the professional misconduct documentation warranted immediate referral to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission, while the financial fraud evidence supported both civil litigation for asset recovery and potential criminal referrals to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. The coordination between these different proceedings required strategic timing that would maximize pressure on David, while preserving opportunities for comprehensive resolution across all areas where he had committed violations. The investigation into Rebecca's involvement required careful analysis of her role in facilitating David's professional fraud versus merely benefiting from his financial deception. The email correspondence I had discovered suggested active participation in planning fraudulent expense submissions rather than passive acceptance of unauthorized financial benefits. Her MBA training and administrative position within Morrison, Blake & Associates had apparently provided both the knowledge needed to optimize their fraud and access to institutional systems that enabled systematic exploitation of firm resources. The expansion of investigation beyond David's activities revealed that Rebecca had been conducting parallel financial fraud through her own expense account manipulation and unauthorized use of firm resources for personal activity. The same analytical techniques that had exposed David's double billing revealed that Rebecca had been charging personal travel, entertainment, and professional development expenses to client accounts while receiving reimbursement for identical activities from alternative funding sources. The sophistication of her fraud suggested coordination with David that preceded their romantic involvement and may have been the foundation for their personal relationship rather than a consequence of. The discovery that both David and Rebecca had been systematically defrauding Morrison, Blake & Associates transformed my understanding of their relationship from romantic affair to criminal partnership. The evidence suggested that their professional misconduct had been carefully planned and executed with precision that indicated extensive experience in institutional fraud. The same legal training and business education that should have made them acutely aware of ethical obligations and fiduciary responsibilities had instead been applied to developing increasingly sophisticated methods for exploiting professional relationships and institutional trust. The psychological profile that emerged from comprehensive analysis of their communication and financial patterns revealed individuals whose ethical frameworks had deteriorated to the point where systematic fraud was considered normal business practice rather than criminal activity. The casual references in their correspondence to client billing irregularities and expense report manipulation suggested that they viewed institutional resources as personal entitlements rather than professional responsibility. The coordination between their individual fraud activities indicated a shared belief that their intelligence and legal training made them immune to detection and accountability. The strategic implications of this expanded evidence were profound because they created vulnerability for both David and Rebecca that extended far beyond our marital relationship. The professional fraud they had committed together represented career-ending misconduct that would result in disciplinary action, civil liability, and potential criminal prosecution, regardless of any divorce proceeding. The same institutional connections that David had viewed as advantages in any personal confrontation would become liabilities once his criminal activity was exposed to partners at Morrison, Blake & Associates, and relevant professional oversight organizations. The investigation methodology I developed during this period represented a synthesis of competitive intelligence gathering and criminal evidence documentation that exceeded anything taught in business school or marketing training programs. The systematic approach required for building comprehensive legal cases drew on strategic planning techniques developed through campaign management combined with evidential standards that ensured admissibility in both civil and criminal proceedings. The project management skills that had coordinated complex marketing initiatives were now being applied to orchestrating legal responses that would address every aspect of systematic fraud and professional misconduct. The evidence portfolio that emerged from this expanded investigation provided documentation of criminal activity that exceeded $60,000 in financial fraud against our marriage and more than $200,000 in professional misconduct against Morrison, Blake & Associates. The timeline analysis revealed that systematic fraud had been ongoing for more than 3 years, with increasing sophistication and scope as David and Rebecca gained confidence in their ability to exploit institutional trust without detection. The coordination between their individual criminal activities indicated planning and execution that approached the level of organized conspiracy rather than opportunistic misconduct. The technological sophistication of the evidence gathering reflected expertise developed through years of digital marketing analytics applied to understanding criminal coordination and financial manipulation. The same data visualization techniques that had made complex market research accessible to executive decision makers were now being used to present evidence in formats that would be compelling to prosecutors, disciplinary committees, and civil litigation attorneys. The pattern analysis that had revealed market opportunities and competitive vulnerabilities was now exposing criminal behavior and institutional exploitation with precision that would support successful legal proceedings across multiple jurisdictions. The communication analysis revealed that David and Rebecca had maintained detailed records of their fraudulent activities, apparently confident that their legal training and institutional positions provided immunity from accountability. The same thoroughness that characterized successful legal practice had been applied to documenting their criminal coordination, creating evidence that would prove invaluable in establishing intent, scope, and systematic planning required for serious criminal charges and professional sanction. The financial impact analysis demonstrated that their fraud had caused damages extending beyond direct financial theft to include opportunity cost, professional damages, and institutional liability that would support substantial civil recovery. The same analytical techniques used for calculating marketing return on investment could be applied to determining comprehensive damages that would account for all direct and indirect consequences of systematic fraud and professional misconduct. The strategic coordination required for addressing criminal activity across multiple jurisdictions demanded project management capabilities that exceeded anything I had previously attempted but remained within the scope of expertise developed through complex marketing campaigns. The timing considerations for parallel legal proceedings required the same attention to sequencing and dependency management that had characterized successful product launches and integrated marketing initiatives. The transformation that occurred during this investigation period represented more than expanded understanding of David's betrayal. The analytical capabilities that had been developed through professional success were being refined and expanded through application to challenges that demanded comprehensive strategic response to systematic criminal activity. The confidence that had been earned through marketing achievements was being validated through investigation that revealed crimes exceeding anything I had initially suspected when I discovered the Maldives booking. The woman who had been devastated by romantic betrayal was evolving into someone whose investigative capabilities exceeded what David or Rebecca had anticipated when they planned their elaborate fraud. The same strategic thinking that had built successful marketing campaigns was now being applied to developing legal responses that would ensure appropriate consequences for systematic criminal activity spanning professional and personal relations. The evidence gathering was approaching completion, and what had emerged was documentation of criminal conspiracy that provided foundation for comprehensive legal action across civil litigation, criminal prosecution, and professional disciplinary proceedings. The skills that had been constrained by assumptions about marriage and domestic partnership were now being applied without limitation to challenges that required every aspect of professional expertise developed through years of competitive business success. The investigation had revealed not only the scope of David and Rebecca's criminal activity, but the extent of my own capabilities when applied to complex challenges requiring systematic analysis and strategic coordination. The foundation that had been built through marketing career success was proving adequate for addressing criminal fraud that required sophisticated opposition and comprehensive legal response. The building phase was complete, and what remained was implementation of strategies that would ensure David and Rebecca faced consequences proportionate to their systematic exploitation of professional relationships and institutional trust. The real confrontation was approaching, and I was discovering that my preparation had been far more comprehensive than either opponent had anticipated when they planned their elaborate criminal conspiracy. The comprehensive investigation I had conducted over the previous month revealed that David and Rebecca's systematic fraud was supported by a network of institutional relationships and professional connections that exceeded anything I had initially anticipated. The evidence I had gathered demonstrated that their criminal activity was not merely tolerated but actively facilitated by colleagues, supervisors, and institutional systems at Morris Blake and Associates, who viewed their misconduct as acceptable business practice rather than serious ethical violation.
The scope of complicity I discovered transformed my understanding of the challenge I faced from individual betrayal to systematic institutional corruption that would require equally systematic opposition to address effectively. The analysis of email communications between David and senior partners at Morrison, Blake and Associates revealed casual discussions about expense report irregularities and client billing practices that suggested widespread acceptance of fraudulent behavior within the firm's culture. The correspondence indicated that systematic exploitation of client accounts and institutional resources was considered normal practice among attorneys who viewed such activities as compensation for demanding work schedules and competitive professional pressures. The same legal training that should have made these professionals acutely aware of fiduciary responsibilities and ethical obligations had apparently been applied to rationalizing criminal behavior as acceptable business strategy. The discovery that managing partner Harrison Blake himself had provided guidance to David about optimizing expense submissions while minimizing audit exposure revealed institutional corruption that extended to the highest levels of firm leadership. The correspondence between them included specific recommendations about which clients were least likely to scrutinize billing details, which types of expenses could be disguised as legitimate business activities, and which accounting periods offered opportunities for systematic fraud without triggering internal oversight procedures. The sophistication of this guidance suggested that expense report fraud was standard practice within the firm rather than individual misconduct by David and Rebecca. The investigation into Rebecca's position within this network revealed that her role extended far beyond administrative support to include coordination of fraudulent activities across multiple attorneys and staff members. Her MBA training and access to firm financial systems had made her an essential facilitator for systematic exploitation of client accounts and institutional resources. The evidence suggested that she had been recruited specifically for her analytical capabilities and willingness to participate in activities that violated both professional ethics and criminal law. Her relationship with David appeared to be built on shared participation in institutional fraud rather than romantic attraction. The financial analysis I conducted revealed that Morrison, Blake and Associates operated expense reimbursement and client billing systems that were deliberately designed to facilitate fraud rather than prevent it. The lack of cross-verification between expense submissions and client charges, the absence of independent audit procedures, and the systematic failure to investigate obvious billing irregularities indicated institutional policies that enabled systematic theft from clients while protecting attorneys from accountability. The firm's culture apparently treated client resources as available for personal use rather than professional stewardship. The client impact analysis demonstrated that the systematic fraud I had documented had caused damages to Morrison, Blake and Associates clients exceeding $2 million over the 3-year period I had investigated. The billing irregularities involved overcharges for services that were never provided, expenses that were systematically inflated beyond actual costs, and professional time that was allocated to client accounts while attorneys were engaged in personal activity. The sophistication of this fraud suggested coordination among multiple firm members who had developed systematic methods for exploiting client trust while avoiding detection through regulatory oversight. The professional consequences of exposing this institutional corruption would extend far beyond David and Rebecca to include disciplinary action against senior partners and potential criminal prosecution of firm leadership for conspiracy to commit fraud. The evidence I had gathered provided foundation for complaints to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission that would trigger comprehensive investigation of firm practices and potential dissolution of partnerships that had been built on systematic criminal activity. The institutional connections that David had viewed as protection would become liabilities once the scope of firm corruption became public knowledge within the Chicago legal community. The strategic implications of this discovery were both empowering and concerning because they revealed that I was confronting systematic institutional corruption rather than individual misconduct. The resources available to oppose my investigation included not only David's personal legal expertise, but the collective capabilities of an entire law firm whose survival depended on preventing exposure of systematic fraud. The same institutional connections that provided them with significant advantages in any legal confrontation would also create vulnerability once their criminal activities were documented comprehensively and presented to appropriate oversight authority. The psychological profile that emerged from analysis of institutional communications revealed a culture of entitlement and ethical deterioration that had normalized criminal behavior among professionals who should have been exemplars of legal integrity. The casual references to client exploitation and systematic fraud suggested individuals whose moral frameworks had been corrupted by institutional pressures and competitive dynamics that rewarded financial performance over ethical compliance. The coordination between multiple firm members indicated shared belief that their legal training and professional status provided immunity from accountability for criminal. The investigation into institutional relationships revealed that Morrison, Blake and Associates maintained connections with judicial officials, regulatory authorities, and law enforcement personnel that could potentially compromise any legal proceedings involving firm members. The evidence suggested that these relationships had been cultivated specifically to provide protection for firm activities that violated both professional ethics and criminal law. The discovery that several judges who might potentially oversee civil litigation or criminal proceedings had received substantial financial benefits from firm resources raised serious concerns about the fairness of any legal process that involved Morrison, Blake and Associates. The analysis of firm financial structures revealed sophisticated asset protection strategies that had been implemented to shield individual partners and institutional resources from liability related to professional misconduct. The corporate entities, trust arrangements, and offshore account structures that protected firm assets indicated systematic preparation for potential criminal prosecution and civil litigation. The same legal expertise that should have been applied to serving client interests had been redirected toward protecting criminal conspirators from accountability for systematic fraud and institutional corruption. The scope of opposition I faced extended beyond individual attorneys to include institutional systems that had been designed to facilitate fraud while avoiding accountability. The challenge required strategic response that could address both individual criminal activity and systematic institutional corruption simultaneously. The same project management capabilities that had coordinated complex marketing campaigns would need to be applied to orchestrating legal action across multiple jurisdictions while maintaining operational security against opponents whose resources and connections exceeded anything I had previously confronted. The technological sophistication of firm security systems revealed that my investigation activities had been conducted under surveillance that could potentially compromise evidence gathering and strategic planning. The network monitoring capabilities maintained by Morrison, Blake and Associates included systems that could track communication patterns, financial transactions, and research activities that might indicate threats to institutional security. The discovery that my internet searches and email communications may have been monitored required immediate implementation of enhanced operational security procedures to protect both evidence integrity and personal safety. The coordination between firm members in maintaining systematic fraud revealed communication protocols and coordination procedures that indicated experience in concealing criminal activity from external oversight. The encrypted communication systems, secure meeting procedures, and document destruction policies suggested institutional preparation for potential investigation and prosecution. The same organizational capabilities that should have been applied to serving client interests had been redirected toward protecting criminal conspirators from accountability for systematic fraud and professional misconduct. The financial resources available to Morrison, Blake and Associates for defending against potential criminal prosecution and civil litigation exceeded anything I could access through personal resources or conventional legal representation. The firm's ability to retain experienced criminal defense attorneys, forensic accountants, and private investigation services created significant advantages in any legal confrontation. The challenge required strategic coordination with law enforcement authorities and regulatory agencies whose resources and authority could match the opposition's capabilities while ensuring comprehensive accountability for systematic criminal activity. The investigation into regulatory oversight revealed that Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission had previously received complaints about Morrison, Blake and Associates practices, but had failed to conduct comprehensive investigation or impose meaningful sanction. The evidence suggested that regulatory capture had compromised oversight effectiveness, with disciplinary committee members maintaining professional and financial relationships with firm partners that created conflicts of interest. The systematic failure of regulatory enforcement indicated that achieving accountability would require federal intervention rather than state-level oversight. The analysis of media relationships revealed that Morrison, Blake and Associates maintained connections with legal journalism and professional publication organizations that could potentially influence public perception of any criminal prosecution or disciplinary proceeding. The firm's ability to shape media narratives about professional misconduct cases created additional challenges for ensuring accurate public understanding of systematic fraud and institutional corruption. The same communication expertise that should have been applied to legitimate client advocacy had been redirected toward protecting criminal conspirators from public accountability. The strategic assessment of available resources revealed that achieving comprehensive accountability for systematic institutional fraud would require coordination with federal law enforcement agencies, whose authority and resources could address criminal conspiracy across state boundaries. The evidence I had gathered provided foundation for referrals to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Internal Revenue Service, whose jurisdiction included systematic fraud against clients and tax evasion related to unreported income from criminal activity. The complexity of federal prosecution procedures required legal representation with experience in white-collar criminal defense and institutional corruption cases. The transformation that occurred through understanding the scope of opposition I faced represented evolution from someone addressing individual betrayal to someone confronting systematic institutional corruption. The analytical capabilities that had been developed through marketing career success were being applied to understanding criminal conspiracy that required comprehensive strategic response across multiple legal and regulatory jurisdictions. The evidence gathering that had begun with personal betrayal had revealed criminal activity that threatened the integrity of legal institutions and required intervention by federal authorities. The woman who had discovered David's travel arrangements was no longer addressing marital misconduct but systematic criminal conspiracy that had corrupted professional institutions and threatened public trust in legal system integrity. The same strategic thinking that had built successful marketing campaigns was now being applied to developing responses that would ensure accountability for institutional fraud and restore ethical standards within professional legal practice. The opposition had been revealed in its full scope and sophistication, but the evidence I had gathered provided foundation for comprehensive legal action that would address both individual criminal activity and systematic institutional corruption. The challenge exceeded anything I had previously confronted, but the capabilities I had developed through professional success and systematic investigation were proving adequate for addressing criminal conspiracy that required sophisticated strategic response and federal law enforcement intervention. The revelation that I faced systematic institutional corruption rather than individual misconduct demanded the development of capabilities that extended far beyond the marketing expertise that had initiated my investigation. The challenge of addressing criminal conspiracy, involving federal law enforcement agencies, regulatory oversight bodies, and complex legal jurisdictions, required strategic adaptation that would test every aspect of my professional development, while demanding the acquisition of specialized knowledge in areas where I possessed no previous experience. The transformation from corporate analyst to criminal investigator represented the most significant professional challenge of my career, but the analytical foundation that had characterized my marketing success provided the framework for systematic skill development that would prove essential for comprehensive accountability. The initial phase of strategic adaptation focused on understanding federal law enforcement procedures and the evidentiary requirements for successful prosecution of white-collar criminal conspiracy. The complexity of coordinating with agencies whose operational protocols differed significantly from corporate business practices required research and preparation that exceeded anything demanded by marketing campaign development. The Federal Bureau of Investigation maintained investigative standards and evidence documentation requirements that were more rigorous than any business analysis I had previously conducted, but the systematic approach that had characterized my professional development could be applied to mastering these specialized procedures. The educational process required for understanding criminal law and federal prosecution procedures drew heavily on the same analytical techniques that had enabled my success in mastering digital marketing analytics and customer relationship management systems. The legal concepts underlying conspiracy prosecution, evidence admissibility standards, and witness protection protocols were conceptually similar to business intelligence gathering, involving systematic data collection, pattern recognition, and strategic coordination across multiple operational areas. The intellectual framework that had enabled rapid adaptation to evolving marketing technologies could be redirected toward understanding criminal justice procedures and federal law enforcement coordination. The development of operational security capabilities represented an entirely new area of expertise that was essential for protecting evidence integrity and personal safety while coordinating with federal authorities. The surveillance detection techniques,
secure communication protocols and document protection procedures required for maintaining investigation security exceeded anything taught in business school or marketing training program. The systematic approach that had characterized my professional development could be applied to mastering these specialized skills, but the learning curve was significant, and the consequences of operational errors could compromise both evidence integrity and personal safety. The coordination with federal law enforcement agencies revealed that successful prosecution of institutional corruption required evidence documentation standards that exceeded corporate accounting and business intelligence requirements. The chain of custody procedures, witness testimony preparation, and cross-jurisdictional coordination demanded attention to detail that surpassed anything required for marketing campaign execution. The project management skills that had coordinated complex business initiatives could be adapted to managing criminal investigation procedures, but the legal and operational constraints were significantly more complex than any business challenge I had previously addressed. The expansion of investigation beyond marketing analytics into forensic accounting required the development of financial analysis capabilities that were more sophisticated than standard business accounting procedures. The techniques needed for documenting systematic fraud across multiple accounting periods and institutional entities demanded expertise in areas including tax law, securities regulation, and international financial transactions. The analytical framework that had enabled my success in market research could be applied to understanding criminal financial patterns, but the complexity of institutional fraud required specialized knowledge that exceeded my existing financial management experience. The psychological preparation required for coordinating with federal prosecutors and regulative authorities demanded communication skills that differed significantly from corporate presentation and client relationship management. The formal procedures and precise language requirements for legal testimony and regulatory filings required adaptation of my professional communication style to meet standards that were more rigorous than any business environment I had previously navigated. The confidence that had been developed through marketing career success provided the foundation for these interactions, but the stakes and operational complexity exceeded anything I had previously encountered. The technological requirements for secure evidence management and federal law enforcement coordination demanded expertise in areas including encryption protocols, secure communication systems, and digital forensics that were more sophisticated than standard business technology applications. The systematic approach that had enabled my mastery of marketing analytics platforms could be applied to understanding these specialized systems, but the security requirements and operational constraints were significantly more complex than any business technology I had previously.
The strategic coordination required for addressing institutional corruption across multiple legal jurisdictions demanded project management capabilities that exceeded anything attempted during my marketing career. The timing considerations for coordinating federal prosecution, regulatory disciplinary proceedings, and civil litigation required attention to dependencies and sequencing that was more complex than any business initiative I had previously managed. The analytical framework that had enabled successful campaign coordination could be adapted to managing these legal procedures, but the consequences of strategic errors exceeded anything encountered in business operations. The development of witness interview and testimony preparation capabilities required communication and analytical skills that drew on marketing experience, but demanded adaptation to legal standards that were more rigorous than any business presentation requirements. The systematic approach to information gathering and strategic communication that had characterized my professional success could be applied to preparing testimony for federal prosecutors, but the precision and accuracy requirements exceeded anything demanded by corporate environments. The financial impact analysis required for supporting federal prosecution and civil litigation demanded expertise in damage calculation methodologies that were more sophisticated than marketing return on investment analysis. The techniques needed for documenting institutional fraud damages across multiple client relationships and accounting periods required understanding of legal concepts, including restitution, punitive damages, and asset recovery, that exceeded my existing business education. The analytical capabilities that had enabled my marketing success provided the foundation for this work, but the legal and financial complexity required specialized knowledge that demanded significant additional education. The coordination with regulatory oversight agencies including the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission and Securities and Exchange Commission required understanding of administrative procedures and regulatory compliance standards that differed significantly from corporate business practices. The evidentiary requirements and procedural protocols for regulatory enforcement actions demanded adaptation of my business analysis skills to meet standards that were more formal and precise than any corporate environment I had previously navigated. The investigation into international financial transactions and offshore asset protection structures required expertise in areas including international banking regulations, tax haven operations, and cross-border law enforcement coordination that exceeded anything addressed during my business career. The complexity of documenting systematic fraud that involved multiple jurisdictions and sophisticated asset protection schemes demanded analytical capabilities that were more advanced than any marketing research I had previously conducted. The development of strategic communication capability for coordinating with media organizations and public interest groups required adaptation of my marketing communication skills to meet standards for accuracy and evidence substantiation that exceeded anything demanded by corporate promotional activity. The responsibility for representing criminal evidence to public audiences required precision and credibility that surpassed any business communication challenge I had previously addressed. The psychological adaptation required for managing the stress and operational demands of coordinating federal criminal investigation drew heavily on the resilience foundation that my mother had established during her own crisis years earlier. The systematic approach that had enabled her transformation from abandoned housewife to successful professional provided the framework for managing emotional pressures that exceeded anything encountered during business challenge. The determination that had characterized her strategic thinking during adversity was now essential for maintaining focus and effectiveness while addressing criminal conspiracy that threatened both personal security and institutional integrity. The technological sophistication required for maintaining operational security while coordinating complex federal investigation demanded expertise in areas including digital surveillance detection, secure file management, and encrypted communication protocols that were more advanced than any business technology I had previously utilized. The systematic approach that had enabled my mastery of marketing analytics could be applied to understanding these specialized systems, but the security implications and operational complexity exceeded anything encountered in corporate environments. The strategic planning required for coordinating comprehensive legal response across multiple jurisdictions demanded analytical capabilities that synthesized everything I had learned through business success with specialized knowledge that had been acquired through intensive education and federal law enforcement coordination. The project management skills that had characterized my marketing career were being applied to orchestrating legal actions that would ensure accountability for institutional corruption while protecting evidence, integrity, and personal safety throughout complex federal prosecution procedures. Transformation that occurred through developing these specialized capabilities represented evolution from someone whose expertise was constrained by corporate business practices to someone whose analytical abilities could address systematic criminal conspiracy that threatened institution integrity. The confidence that had been earned through marketing achievements was being validated through successful coordination with federal authorities whose resources and expertise exceeded anything available in business environment. The skill development process had demonstrated that the analytical foundation developed through business success could be adapted to addressing challenges that initially seemed beyond my capability. The systematic approach that had characterized my professional development proved adequate for mastering specialized knowledge areas that were essential for comprehensive accountability. The woman who had discovered David's travel arrangements had evolved into someone whose capabilities exceeded what any opponent had anticipated when they planned their systematic criminal conspiracy. The strategic adaptation was complete, and what remained was implementation of comprehensive legal response that would ensure appropriate consequences for institutional corruption, while demonstrating that individual capabilities could be developed to address even sophisticated criminal networks that believed they possessed immunity from accountability through institutional protection or professional status. The establishment of formal relationships with federal law enforcement agencies marked the transition from individual investigation to institutional response that would address systematic corruption through coordinated legal action. The complexity of building credibility agencies whose operational protocols differed significantly from corporate business practices required strategic communication that demonstrated both the evidentiary strength of my investigation and my capability to support comprehensive prosecution efforts. The process of transforming my individual documentation into institutional cases demanded collaboration with professionals whose expertise exceeded my specialized knowledge, while maintaining the analytical rigor that had characterized my investigation from its inception. The initial contact with Special Agent Catherine Morrison of the Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division occurred through established referral procedures that required formal documentation of suspected criminal activity exceeding federal jurisdiction thresholds. The evidence portfolio I had developed through months of systematic investigation provided sufficient foundation for preliminary assessment, but the transition from business analytics to criminal evidence required adaptation of presentation methodologies to meet federal law enforcement standards. The strategic communication skills that had enabled my marketing career success could be applied to building credibility with federal authorities, but the precision and accuracy requirements exceeded anything demanded by corporate environment. Agent Morrison's preliminary assessment confirmed that the evidence I had gathered documented criminal conspiracy that warranted comprehensive federal investigation, but successful prosecution would require coordination across multiple agencies whose jurisdictional responsibilities addressed different aspects of institutional fraud. The Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division maintained authority over tax evasion and unreported income related to systematic fraud, while the Securities and Exchange Commission addressed regulatory violations involving client trust accounts and fiduciary responsibility. The coordination between these agencies demanded project management capabilities that exceeded my business experience but remained within the analytical framework I had developed through complex marketing campaigns. The establishment of formal cooperation agreements with federal agencies required legal representation that specialized in white-collar criminal cases and possessed experience in coordination between individual complainants and institutional prosecutors. The attorney selection process drew heavily on research methodologies I had developed through competitive analysis and vendor evaluation, involving systematic assessment of experience, resources, and strategic compatibility. The legal team that emerged from this selection process included professionals whose expertise in federal prosecution procedures complemented my analytical capabilities while providing institutional credibility that was essential for comprehensive accountability. The coordination with Assistant United States Attorney Jennifer Walsh required adaptation of my business communication style to meet formal legal standards while maintaining the analytical precision that had characterized my investigation. The evidence presentation procedures for federal prosecutors demanded documentation that exceeded corporate reporting requirements in both accuracy and comprehensiveness. The systematic approach that had enabled my marketing success could be applied to meeting these standards, but the legal implications and procedural complexity required careful attention to details that could determine prosecution success or failure. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.